Harald Sigurdsson, given the epithet Hardrada in the sagas, was king of Norway from 1046 to 1066. In addition, he unsuccessfully claimed the Danish throne until 1064 and the English throne in 1066. Prior to becoming king, Harald had spent around 15 years in exile as a mercenary and military commander in Kiev in Russian in the Byzantine Empire. When he was 15 years old, in 1030, Harald fought in the Battle of Stiklestad together with his half-brother Olaf Haraldsson. Olaf sought to reclaim the Norwegian throne, which he had lost to the Danish king Cnut the Great 2 years prior. In the battle, Olaf and Harald were defeated by forces loyal to Cnut, and Harald was forced in exile to Kiev and Rus. He thereafter spent some time in the army of Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise, eventually obtaining rank as a captain, until he moved on to Constantinople with his companions around 1034. In Constantinople, he soon rose to become the commander of the Byzantine Varangian Guard, and saw action on the Mediterranean Sea, in Asia Minor, Sicily, possibly in the Holy Land, Bulgaria and in Constantinople itself, where he became involved in the imperial dynastic disputes. Harald amassed considerable wealth during his time in the Byzantine Empire, which he shipped to Yaroslav and Kiev in Rus for safekeeping. He finally left the Byzantines in 1042, and arrived back in Kiev in Rus in order to prepare his campaign of reclaiming the Norwegian throne. Possibly to Harald's knowledge, in his absence the Norwegian throne had been restored from the Danes to Olaf's illegitimate son Magnus the Good. In 1046, Harald joined forces with Magnus's rival in Denmark, the pretender Sweyn II of Denmark, and started raiding the Danish coast. Magnus, unwilling to fight his uncle, agreed to share the kingship with Harald, since Harald in turn would share his wealth with him. The co-rule ended abruptly the next year as Magnus died, and Harald thus became the sole ruler of Norway. Domestically, Harald crushed all local and regional opposition, and outlined the territorial unification of Norway under a national governance. Harald's reign was probably one of relative peace and stability, and he instituted a viable coin economy and foreign trade. Probably seeking to restore Cnut's North Sea Empire, Harald also claimed the Danish throne, and spent nearly every year until 1064 raiding the Danish coast and fighting his former ally Sweyn. Although the campaigns were successful, he was never able to conquer Denmark. Not long after announcing his claim to Denmark, the former Earl of Northumbria, Tostig Godwinson, brother of the newly chosen English King Harold Godwinson, pledged his allegiance to Harald and invited him to claim the English throne. Harald went along and entered northern England in September 1066, raided the coast and defeated English regional forces in the Battle of Fulford near York. Although initially successful, Harald was defeated and killed in an attack by Harold Godwinson's forces in the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Modern historians have often considered Harald's death at Stamford Bridge, which brought an end to his invasion, as the end of the Viking Age. Harald is also commonly held to have been the last great Viking king, or even the last great Viking. Early life. Harald was born in Ringerike, Norway in 1015 to Asta Gudbrandsdatter and her second husband Sigurd Seer. Sigurd was a petty king of Ringerike, and among the strongest and wealthiest chieftains in the uplands. Through his mother Asta, Harald was the youngest of King Olaf Haraldsson's 3 half-brothers. In his youth, Harald displayed traits of a typical rebel with big ambitions, and admired Olaf as his role model. He thus differed from his 2 older brothers who were more similar to their father, down-to-earth and mostly concerned with maintaining the farm. The Icelandic sagas, in particular Snorri Sturluson in Heimskringla, claim that Sigurd, like Olaf's father, was a great-grandson of King Harald Fairhair in the male line. Most modern scholars believe that the ancestors attributed to Harald Hardrada's father, along with other parts of the Fairhair genealogy, are inventions reflecting the political and social expectations of the time of the authors rather than historical reality. Harald Hardrada's alleged descent from Harald Fairhair is not mentioned and played no part during Harald Hardrada's own time, which seems odd considering that it would have provided significant legitimacy in connection with his claim to the Norwegian throne. Following a revolt in 1028, Harald's brother Olaf was forced into exile until he returned to Norway in early 1030. Upon hearing news of Olaf's planned return, Harald gathered 600 men from the uplands to meet Olaf and his men upon their arrival in the east of Norway. After a friendly welcome, Olaf went on to gather an army and eventually fight in the Battle of Stiklestad on the 29th of July 1030. In which Harald took part on his brother's side. The battle was part of an attempt to restore Olaf to the Norwegian throne, which had been captured by the Danish king Cnut the Great. The battle resulted in defeat for the brothers at the hands of those Norwegians who were loyal to Cnut, and Olaf was killed while Harald was badly wounded. Harald was nonetheless remarked to have shown considerable military talent during the battle. Exile in the east. To Kiev in Rus after the defeat of the Battle of Stiklestad, Harald managed to escape with the aid of Rocknvold Bruseson to a remote farm in eastern Norway. He stayed there for some time to heal his wounds, and thereafter journeyed north over the mountains to Sweden. A year after the Battle of Stiklestad, Harald arrived in Kiev and Rus. He likely spent at least part of his time in the town of Stara Ladoga, arriving there in the first half of 1031. Harald and his men were welcomed by Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise, whose wife Ingegerd was a distant relative of Harald. Badly in need of military leaders, Yaroslav recognized a military potential in Harald and made him a captain of his forces. Harald's brother Olaf Haraldsson had previously been in exile to Yaroslav following the revolt in 1028, and Morkinskinna says that Yaroslav embraced Harald first and foremost because he was the brother of Olaf. Harald took part in Yaroslav's campaign against the Poles in 1031, and possibly also fought against other 1030s Kievan enemies and rivals such as the Teudes in Estonia, the Byzantines, as well as the Pechenegs and other steppe nomad people. In Byzantine service after a few years in Kiev in Rus, Harald and his force of around 500 men moved on south to Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, probably in 1033 or 1034, where they joined the Varangian Guard. Although the Flat-Eye Jarbok maintains that Harald at first sought to keep his royal identity a secret, most sources agree that Harald and his men's reputation was well known in the East at the time. While the Varangian Guard was primarily meant to function as the emperor's bodyguard, Harald was found fighting on nearly every frontier of the empire. He first saw action in campaigns against Arab pirates in the Mediterranean, and then in inland towns in Asia Minor that had supported the pirates. By this time, he had, according to Snorri Sturluson, become the leader over all the Varangians. By 1035 the Byzantines had pushed the Arabs out of Asia Minor, and Harald took part in campaigns that went as far east as the Euphrates, where according to his skald Tjóðifar Norsen he participated in the capture of 80 Arab strongholds, a number which historians Sigfús Blöndal and Benedict see no particular reason to question. Although not holding independent command of an army as the sagas imply, it is not unlikely that Harald and the Varangians at times could have been sent off to capture a castle or town. During the first 4 years of the reign of Byzantine Emperor Michael IV, Harald probably also fought in campaigns against the Pechenegs. Thereafter, Harald is reported in the sagas to have gone to Jerusalem and fought in battles in the area. Although the sagas place this after his expedition to Sicily, historian Kelly de Vries has questioned that chronology. Whether his trip was of a military or peaceful nature would depend on whether it took place before or after the 1036 peace treaty between Michael IV and the Fatimid Caliph Maad al-Mustanzir Billah. Although it is considered unlikely to have been made before, modern historians have speculated that Harald may have been in a party sent to escort pilgrims to Jerusalem following the peace agreement, as it was also agreed that the Byzantines were allowed to repair the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Furthermore, this may in turn have presented Harald with opportunities to fight against bandits who preyed on Christian pilgrims. In 1038, Harald joined the Byzantines in their expedition to Sicily, in George Maniak's attempt to reconquer the island from the Saracens, who had established the Emirate of Sicily on the island. During the campaign, Harald fought alongside Norman mercenaries such as William Iron-Arm. According to Snorri Sturluson, Harald captured 4 towns on Sicily. In 1041, when the Byzantine expedition to Sicily was over, a Lombard-Norman revolt erupted in southern Italy, and Harald led the Varangian Guard in multiple battles. Harald fought with the Catapan of Italy, Michael Docianos, with initial success, but the Normans, led by their former ally William Iron-Arm, defeated the Byzantines in the Battle of Olivento in March, and in the Battle of Montemaggiore in May. After the defeat, Harald and the Varangian Guard were called back to Constantinople. Following Maniak's imprisonment by the emperor and the onset of other more pressing issues, Harald and the Varangians were thereafter sent to fight in Bulgaria, where they arrived in late 1041. There, he fought in the army of Michael IV in the 1041 campaign against the Bulgarian uprising led by Peter Delian, which later gained Harald the nickname the Bulgar Burner by his scald. Harald was not affected by Maniak's conflict with Michael IV, and received honours and respect upon his return to Constantinople. In a Greek book written in the 1070s, the Strategikon of Kekaumenos, Araltes is said to have won the favour of the emperor. The book says that the Byzantine emperor first appointed him Manglabites, a soldier of the imperial guard, after the Sicilian campaign. Following the campaign against the Bulgarians, in which Harald again served with distinction, he received the rank while at Mousinopolis of Spatharocandidatus, identified by De Vries as a promotion to the possibly third highest Byzantine rank, but by Mikhail Bibikov as a lesser rank than Protospartharios that was ordinarily awarded to foreign allies to the emperor. The Strategikon indicates that the ranks awarded to Harald were rather low, since Harald reportedly was not angry for just having been appointed to Manglabites or Spatharocandidatus. According to his skald Theodulf Arnórsson, Harald had participated in 18 greater battles during his Byzantine service. Harald's favour at the imperial court quickly declined after the death of Michael IV in December 1041, which was followed by conflicts between new Emperor Michael V and the powerful Empress Zoe. During the turmoil, Harald was arrested and imprisoned, but the sources disagree on the grounds. The sagas state that Harald was arrested for defrauding the emperor of his treasure, as well as for requesting marriage with an apparently fictional niece or granddaughter of Zoe, called Maria. William of Malmesbury states that Harald was arrested for defiling a noble woman, while according to Saxo Grammaticus he was imprisoned for murder. De Vries suggests that the new emperor may have feared Harald because of his loyalty to the previous emperor. The sources also disagree on how Harald got out of prison, but he may have been helped by someone outside to escape in the midst of the revolt that had begun against the new emperor. While some of the Varangians helped guard the emperor, Harald became the leader of the Varangians who supported the revolt. The emperor was in the end dragged out of his sanctuary, blinded and exiled to a monastery, and the sagas claim that it was Harald himself who blinded Michael V. Back to Kiev and Rus. Harald became extremely rich during his time in the east. and secured the wealth collected in Constantinople by shipments to Kiev in Rus for safekeeping. The sagas note that aside from the significant spoils of battle he had retained, he had participated 3 times in Polutezvarth, a term which implies either the pillaging of the palace exchequer on the death of the emperor, or perhaps the disbursement of funds to the Varangians by the new emperor in order to ensure their loyalty. It is likely that the money Harald made while serving in Constantinople allowed him to fund his claim for the crown of Norway. If he participated in Polutezvarth 3 times, these occasions must have been the deaths of Romanos III, Michael IV, and Michael V, in which Harald would have opportunities beyond his legitimate revenues to carry off immense wealth. After Zoe had been restored to the throne in June 1042 together with Constantine IX, Harald requested to be allowed to return to Norway. Although Zoe refused to allow this, Harald managed to escape into the Bosphorus with 2 ships and some loyal followers. Although the second ship was destroyed by the Byzantine cross-strait iron chains, Harald's ship sailed safely into the Black Sea after successfully maneuvering over the barrier. Despite this, Kekaumanus lauds the loyalty and love Harald had for the empire, which he reportedly maintained even after he returned to Norway and became king. Following his escape from Constantinople, Harald arrived back in Kiev in Rus later in 1042. During his second stay there, he married Elizabeth, daughter of Yaroslav the Wise and granddaughter of the Swedish king Olaf Skotkonung. Shortly after Harald's arrival in Kiev, Yaroslav attacked Constantinople, and it is considered likely that Harald provided him with valuable information about the state of the empire. It is possible that the marriage with Elizabeth had been agreed to already during Harald's first time in Rus, or that they at least had been acquainted. During his service in the Byzantine Empire, Harald composed a love poem which included the verse, "Yet the goddess in Russia will not accept my gold rings," although Morkinskinner claims that Harald had to remind Yaroslav of the promised marriage when he returned to Kiev. According to the same source, Harald had spoken with Yaroslav during his first time in Rus, requesting to marry Elizabeth, only to be rejected because he was not yet wealthy enough. It is in any case significant that Harald was allowed to marry the daughter of Yaroslav, since his other children were married to figures such as Henry I of France, Andrew I of Hungary and the daughter of Constantine IX.